thing I wanted to chat to you guys about is the trance of thought, when we are getting swept up in that trance of thought. So according to Siri, we experience anywhere between 6,000 and 70,000 thoughts per day. So I guess that means that knowing when you are being swept up in thought may save you some energy throughout the day. So my question to you guys is, do you experience your day through the lens of thought or through the body, meaning the senses, right? Now, in my experience, the problem with living life through the lens of thought is that it creates these truths that actually don't exist, or they're versions of the truth. Because what's really happening in your moment is only what you feel with your senses, and everything else is just made up by thought. So when you are deep in that trance of thought, the body actually ends up following the thoughts, right? When you've fully latched on, which then in turn makes it feel like those thoughts are realities, that it is actually the world when they're not. And it often starts before there's any emotional or physical dissonance. And that's why we can literally go for hours or days operating from that space, because we haven't hit any challenges that inspire us to self-reflect or adjust. So this can be the form of daydreaming, reflecting. Like yesterday, I was fully swept up in the trance of thought, reflecting on some experiences while I'm driving to work. It often happens when you're bored, right? So if what's happening in the moment is boring or whatever, then, and you've got no way to get out of that, then boom, you start playing some mini movies in your head. It could be reading an article, it can be scrolling through socials. As a musician, creating, or getting swept up in the trance of thought. And now it doesn't feel like a problem until a negative thought surfaces that really carries some weight and power. It could be a memory, it could be something of concern. And then because you're operating from that space, it feels like the whole world has darkened, when in fact it's just the thought, and the actual world is often quite a complete contrast. So I will say that I don't want to demonize thoughts. So thoughts are definitely not bad, and they're helpful because they help us reflect, anticipate, judge, create, and they can obviously help us to make decisions. But operating fundamentally from that base of the body enables us to use thought as a tool rather than a means of living. An example, I talk a lot about tracking. So when you're not sure why you feel the way you feel, is just to track your thoughts. When you go for a walk along the beach or you do some exercise, like, are you really in your body? Are you feeling your senses, or are you somewhere else? It's much harder to get swept up in those thoughts and the emotions that those thoughts trigger when you're operating and focus more on the body and carrying out your experiences in a way that aligns with the senses than if you're already up there in your head in this world, right? So one cool little way to break out of that trance, and this is something that I learned from somebody I follow called Tara Brock, is to take 60 seconds to literally count your thoughts. When you step out and you can observe them, then you're no longer identified with it, which is much easier. It's much easier to be making, wiser decisions, and much easier to process thought and emotion. So can we do that real quick now? Just take 60 seconds, just 1 minute. I would love you to you can do it with your eyes open if you want, or if it's a bit easier, feel free to close your eyes. But just focus on your breath just for a second. You don't have to change it or anything. Just choose where you're focusing. Focus on your breath. And now I just want you to count your thoughts. See if you can count them. 60 seconds, all I want you to do is count your thoughts. And let's see how many we count, all right? Okay, so Dash had 4. I only had 2 thoughts, okay? Because we drew attention to it, they stopped, but I counted at least 23. 15, 6. Okay, I had 17. As you can see, there's such a difference in thought count between each person here. And you'll find that if you take 60 seconds now, and maybe you take 60 seconds in a couple hours' time, depending on what you're doing, your number will be different. So right now, I would consider that my mind is not very racy at the moment. There was a point where I was like, where are my thoughts? And then they kind of started to roll in, and I noticed them ramp up when I heard Amy rock up after dropping the kids off at school, right? So when there's silence, and that probably showed me that my mind, I'm feeling pretty peaceful, because most of my thoughts were related to outside triggers, the car coming by, and like multiple cars coming by, a door closing, a voice that I heard. That was kind of what was triggering my thoughts. Now, what happens when I am anxious is that it's not so much triggered by what's happening outside. It's created from inside here. And that's also how you know, in those 60 seconds, are you operating from the point of view of experience in terms of what's actually happening now? So I feel quite present, because most of my thoughts, and one indicator to that is that most of my thoughts were related to what's happening here. Whereas I can, when I'm feeling anxious and I take 60 seconds and it's a completely quiet room and there's nothing triggering my mind, but I've got fucking 20 million thoughts running around in my head, and most of them are not good. That is how I know that I'm up in my head and I am walking around in this world that is created from up here. So when you do those little sort of 60 seconds, notice the difference as well between what is actually happening and what the thought is. If you can feel there's a contrast, and just at least being aware of that contrast is really, really helpful to be able to manage any type of troubling thoughts and emotions that might surface. So general takeaway is, what I would encourage is set an intention to focus on your senses. That's what has really helped me. Focus on your senses and simply note when you've been swept up in the trance of thought. And try and do it before it becomes a problem, right? Because you will find that if you're operating from that base of senses, it's much harder to get swept up in negative thought. There you go. What are your thoughts? Let me know. What are your thoughts on the thought matter?